Hey guys, today I've got a pretty big project, but one that can save you pretty good money if you're going to be using your bike a lot. That is how to take off your front and rear wheels yourself. Now maybe you've got to replace your brake rotors. Maybe you're like me and you just want to save a few bucks by taking them off and bringing the wheels to your dealer to have your tires replaced. For those of you that ride a lot or have a lot of bikes, it makes sense for you to buy the balancing tool and the mounting tools and all that kind of stuff and do your own tire changes. It's not terribly difficult. I've done it once at a friend's. I've never done it myself because it doesn't make financial sense because I don't go through that many miles. I just take them to the dealer, pay them 30, 40 bucks, and boom, I know it's done real easy. But you save yourself money by not taking them the whole bike and then making them do all the disassembly just to change the tires. So that will easily pay for whatever tools you have to buy to do this job the very first time you do that. Now there are other good reasons why you want to be able to do this yourself. One is to do the servicing yourself for all the lubrication of the joints, the swing arm eventually. That's going to be done at 16,000 miles. I'll have another video for that separately because that is more involved than what I'm going to show you today. But even if you're like this and have a relatively brand new bike, you want to do this, at least on the FJR1300, to verify that the factory has put in the proper lubrication on this rear end, because they are quite frankly notorious for not doing so. So I'm going to be taking mine off, show you all the details. This is obviously a ES, well maybe not so obviously, this is a 2014 ES model. It's a Generation 3. These instructions are going to be virtually identical for all the ABS models, even Generation 2. If you've got an older one without ABS or a Generation 1, there's just going to be a few steps that you just simply omit. So the other important thing is torque values. They do change generation to generation. I'll be telling you what the book spec is for mine for Generation 3, but know up front, they are different if you have a Generation 1 or 2. So consult your service manual for the specific torque values for all the fasteners. They do change. They may even change year to year, but definitely they change generation to generation. The first thing I noticed was when I was reading the values in the book, these are different than my 2006. So, little tip there. All right, got a lot of work to do. Let's get going. Okay, the first step is to put the bike up on the center stand. That's going to give us height, get the wheel off the ground to allow us to actually remove it. First thing we have to do is loosen this connection right here. We have a 12mm bolt and a 6mm hex. We don't need to remove this. This is the brake stabilizer bar right here, and it's going to be able to pivot and give us clearance, but we do need to loosen this top one here. Now we have our brake lines and our ABS sensor lines right here. So what you want to use is an Allen key or a hex key to get it in there, because the socket won't fit very safely underneath these lines. And then we can use a 12mm, and the longer the better, to get in here and loosen this nut. I almost forgot my gloves. Another very good tip. Alright, now this bolt can be a bitch. What I like to do is I've got the Allen key in sideways like this and put a wrench on it to get some more leverage, and that can help really easily twist it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and we'll just loosen this up some more. I already got it broke free. There we go. So we just want it able to move. We're not going to remove it. So we're done with that. Now we've got to actually remove the bottom one. Let me reposition the camera here for you. I don't think I can show you as I remove this one, but it's same thing. We're going to remove the bolt though on this one. It's right here. This little guy right in the bottom. Same thing. So just Allen hex key on this side, wrench on this side, and slide that right out, and then this will just droop right down to the bottom, out of the way. Now your bike may or may not have one of these. This was a retainer clip, and it was right down by the end bolt there, securing the brake line to the stabilizer bar. If you have one of these, you need to carefully pry it out with a screwdriver and release the brake line. This is going to give us enough slack so that we can slide that rear caliper off. The bar is now down all the way. It doesn't move much. That's all it has to move, is just out of the way. And this will give us our clearance needed to actually take everything off. We've got a big old 27mm nut here on the left of the bike. This is our main axle nut. I'm going to go ahead and remove it. Obviously, you may need to buy a 27mm socket. Surprisingly, Sears sells these individually really inexpensively now, just a few bucks. I remember years ago, man, they would be like 25, 30 bucks. They were just ridiculous. This is not on with any kind of extreme force. Just go ahead and completely remove this. Don't worry, nothing is going to move. We're not even close to being able to take the axle out yet. There is a flat washer on here. Just go ahead and keep these separately. Keep them out of dirt. What I like to do is take a towel or two and use those to keep all the parts on. So keep them nice and clean. Okay, now over on the right, just two things left. This is your pinch bolt. This is pretty much an emergency measure in case that nut ever came off on the road. This prevents the axle from actually sliding out. So this is just pinching basically two parts of the swing arm together. And we're going to loosen this, not remove it. And it's probably going to be a bitch. So let me get a longer wrench here. There we go. Just get it loose enough to spin. Now the fun part, the axle comes out. Theoretically, this should not be a big deal. What we have is a fitting for a 14mm hex or Allen key, socket, whatever. You just stick this in, you give it a little tension in your hand, you'll kind of pull it one way, and you'll be able to then slide the axle out. Now this is why I say theoretically it shouldn't be a big deal, because there should be good amounts of grease everywhere and it should slide out pretty easy. All we have to do is take our foot and raise up, put a little pressure underneath the wheel to take the weight off of it so that that axle is free floating. Same thing if you know, you're taking off your car wheel and you're trying to balance it just to slide onto the lug nuts just right. Same thing. That's all we're doing here. So I'm just gonna put a little pressure up, wiggle this a bit, try to get it to slide out. Let's see if it works. Doesn't want to come so far. Now this is a factory fresh bike, only a couple thousand miles on it. Worst case, you can take a rubber mallet and help it from the other side, which I'm going to do in a second here if I don't get any kind of movement. And I'm not feeling a darn thing. So I'm going to go ahead and use my rubber mallet here. Very gently just give that threaded side a tap. Still putting the tire up on my foot here just to see if we get some movement. And we do. Alright, so now it's moving. That did it. Didn't take anything. I didn't put any pressure behind it. I'm just doing this. You know, so not banging on anything. Make sure you use a rubber mallet if you do that. But that tells me that there probably isn't proper grease on everything in here, because it should slide. So now we're going to try to wiggle it the rest of the way out. It is still pretty tight by hand here. Come on now. There we go. Finally got it to twist a little bit. Now we just slide it the rest of the way out. Now there's one washer. Keep this aside and clean. This goes directly on the inside of the swing arm before the brake caliper bracket. Now let's take a look at this. See what we have. I have no grease at all on the inner parts of this axle. No grease at all on the outer parts. I mean, this thing is entirely 100% bone dry. Nothing at all. It's even so dry it's sticking to these latex gloves. Alright, so that proves my point right there, why we're doing this video. If you buy a brand new bike, you want to do this to make sure everything is good. Okay, now very important, do not set this down in anything dirty. Okay, I'm going to get a clean terry cloth or clean towel, wipe this off and grease it before it goes back in, but I'm setting it aside down with my other parts, nice and safe on a towel. Now we've only got two things left. We have the brake caliper bracket. This is going to completely stay assembled, and it's going to slide down towards about the 5 o'clock position. This piece here, this plastic piece here, is the ABS sensor. Big note, and there's warnings all over the service manual for this, do not get any magnets near this piece here, the hub assembly, or the sensor in here. No magnets anywhere near this stuff. Bad things will happen. Alright? There is an alignment between the brake caliper bracket and the ABS unit. You'll note, well, I'll show you after they go on, but you can probably see them a little bit here. There's a little indicator here and a little indicator here. Those are supposed to be aligned. There's also a tab and a slot behind this that it slides out at. That's why you need to slide it down at about a 5 o'clock angle. I'm just going to wiggle it a little bit to release the brake pads, give myself a little bit of room, and it's off the rotor. That's all there is to it. I'm just going to gently let this hang. These are not especially heavy calipers or brackets or anything like that, not like a car, so I don't have any compunction about just letting them sit. I never do cars. And then the ABS ring and sensor, I'm just going to swing it up and out of the way, just tuck it in here over the other side of the swing arm, and that's that. And now, and look at that, there's even a warning right here on the wheel hub. Notice, don't put a magnet near this part. So they are really adamant about that. So just a warning, there are no magnetic tools, no part pickup things. If you put this in your car and you're taking it to get your tire changed, you know, make sure there's nothing in the back of your car that's magnetic, nothing. So there you go. All right, now let's get this wheel off. All right, nothing too difficult here at all. This is exactly like pulling your car wheel off the studs and removing it from the vehicle. We've got an inch or so of clearance, not even that, underneath the bike, so it has room to come out and it's not scraping on the ground. First thing I want to do here is take this brake bracket, just slide it to the outside of the rotors and let it come up. And I rotate the wheel a little bit so I'm not scratching the rotor or anything like that. It's a snug fit, but it's not tight. It's not going to break anything. And just tuck that up out of the way. That gives us some more clearance there down at the bottom. Now, all we have to do is again put our foot under the tire here, lift up a little bit. We're going to wiggle and we're going to move everything to the right. It's going to come off, just like if I was pulling this off the side of a car, it's going to come off gears on the left side, and it doesn't have to move far, only about an inch. So just take some weight off of it, give it a wiggle, pull to the right, and there we go. So now we just tilt this guy a little bit, wheel her out. You know, I'm going to show that again, just because there's a lot of people that say it's virtually impossible to get this wheel out, and you have to go through all this crap of putting it up on a piece of wood under the center stand, all that stuff. There's nothing difficult about getting this out just on the center stand. What you do is after you take it off, pick it up and slide it all the way to the right so that the brake rotor is right up against the swing arm. Bring it back towards an angle. Now we've got the spline hub cleared the left-hand side of the bike. Now all you have to do is pick it up a little bit, tilt it, and out she comes. Okay, don't try to roll the thing all the way back. Pick it up. Not a big deal at all. Once you do it the first time, you're going to be like, oh, that's it? Why was I going through all that crap before? So there you go. Now if you put on an oversized tire, yeah, you're going to need more clearance, because this stocker, I mean, they designed it to fit, but barely. Put something bigger on, all bets are off. You might be removing your exhaust can, or yeah, jacking it up a little bit or something like that. But there you go, no big deal. Okay, so let's take a look at the bread and butter here, what we're really here to see. We're looking for good grease coverage on these splines. These are in the inside of the wheel. And you know what? That looks damn good. I have no problem with that. Nice even coat. It's not thin anywhere. Let's look at the inside. I have no problem with that at all. All right, very cool. Now, if you don't see this, or if you see dirt, you see any dry spots, you see any rust, you're going to want to thoroughly clean it and put on some new grease, such as Mobil 1 synthetic. Okay, now we're going to go one step further, and we're going to inspect the drive shaft itself. It lives in the left-hand side of the swing arm, and what we're going to do is take off the pumpkin. This is just like the rear differential in a car, basically, except it only goes one way instead of two. We have 4 14mm acorn nuts that we have to take off, and then this simply slides back and the drive shaft will come with it. At least it should. Let's see if I have enough clearance in here. Probably not. I'm probably going to have to get my short wobbly extension. Let's see if I can even get that in there. No. Well, barely. So we'll do it that way. Alright, after you get all those acorn nuts loosened and removed, there are washers behind each one, so they're going to fall down when you take this off. Just be aware of that. There's also a collar in here in the center that you want to pull out and keep very clean and safe. I'm going to set this down on a towel out of the way. Now just grab the bottom of the pumpkin. Make sure all your nuts are off. Don't forget those washers are going to fall. Just slide the drive shaft out. And again, set this aside on a clean towel. And we'll take a look at that. Let's see if we're equally happy as the drive shaft splines are as we were with the rear end. Okay, not happy at all with the way this looks. Virtually nothing but a film on the splines themselves. Very, very little grease. Obviously big spots of nothing. A little tiny blob there. That's it. So that is horrible. Very glad I did this. Like I said, it's only I think I have 3,000 miles on this bike. If you have a new one, pull this apart. We are going to want to lube these drive shaft splines. This goes into the universal joint, which is up in there that you probably can't see. And obviously it doesn't have lube either. At least on the inside of it where this joins. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, let's talk greases for a second. There are two basic types of greases that you're going to be using throughout the bike. Moly and lithium. These two can be found in virtually any auto store, probably even Walmart. You got Mobil 1 Synthetic, which is an excellent top-notch lithium-based grease, and you have Valvoline Synthetic, which is an excellent moly grease. Now the differences between the two, basically a moly grease is heavier duty. They're both excellent greases, but the moly is heavier duty and designed to provide lubrication in case the lubricant itself fails and goes dry. You're still going to have some protection, but it is a little bit heavier duty as far as its composition. So basically, the moly gets used on all the gears, and the lithium gets used on everything smooth, like shafts, collars, bearings, that kind of thing. So we're going to go ahead and use the moly on the drive shaft splines, and we're going to use the lithium on the axle when it goes back in. First, I'm going to clean off what little, absolutely pathetically little grease was on this drive shaft. Look at that. That's all there was. That was everything lubricating that drive shaft. Pathetic. Now I'm going to go ahead and just take a little dab. You don't need much. You're looking for a nice even coat. You're not looking for big globs to be sticking, because you don't want it slinging around. Now remember, the other side of this was also bone dry, so don't be afraid to put a nice thick even coat on there. So there we go. So that's ready. I'm just going to set that down on the paper towel there, and that is good for reinsertion. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so now we can go ahead and put the drive shaft back in. Now to make this easier, you have to remember that the U-joint up at the other end is flopped to the bottom. So slide this in, and about 3 inches from the back, you're going to feel it hit. Just aim for the bottom. It's going to take some wiggling, and you may have to put your finger on the shaft here, turn things around to get it to go into the splines itself. Just keep working at it. Just got to find the right opening and get those aligned. It'll wiggle in. There we go. Just take some finagling. There's really no secret to it. And we're going to put back on our 4 flat washers. And our 4 acorn nuts. Now we need to torque those acorn nuts. Now the Generation 3, this torque spec on these is 30 foot-pounds, but check your service manual. Other generations may be different. I'm going to go ahead and torque these down. Now we can go ahead and move on to the front wheel. In order to do the front wheel, you have to have removed the rear, because we need to raise this stuff up in the air to get the wheel off, and you need that clearance in the back. We're going to start here. Basically the same procedure. We're going to remove the brake caliper bracket. We have 2 12mm bolts right here. This top one also holds on the reflector, so just bear that in mind when it comes out. This will want to fall. Okay, now just like the rear, we need to get that front about 1 inch off the ground just to give ourselves clearance to get the wheel out and clear the fender, obviously. Higher the better, basically. If you can get it 3-4 inches in the air, that's cool too. With the rear tire off, you can see that we've got plenty of clearance, so I'm going to just do what I need to do to clear that fender. If you have a pit stand, that is the easiest thing. That'll go right in and lever that sucker right up and you're done. Now most of us are not going to have a pit stand, unless you're riding a track bike or a sport bike that doesn't have a side stand, or maybe a motocross, you're not going to have one, and it might not be worth it for you to buy it. If you have a jack and a couple jack stands, you can do what I'm going to do. I'm going to be jacking underneath the headers. Now, we're not lifting the weight of the bike, so don't worry about that. I would never do that to the headers if I was lifting the weight of the bike. I can lean on the back and tilt the sucker right up. All right, it's maybe 40 pounds at the most. If you have a helper, you can do it that way. You can just have them lean on the back and it'll raise the front right up, no problem whatsoever. And then you can put your jack stands under the front forks. I'm going to just use my handy dandy textbook. Works for throttle body sinks and for jacking up under the headers. I'll put that on top of the jack. That will allow me to jack up. Now when I put the jack stands under here, number one, I'm going to put a little cloth on top of it so it's not metal to metal. And what you want to do is get just the edge of this on the trailing edge of the fork, because it's down at an angle, it's not flat. And the jack stands are all going to be kind of a pyramid shape. And you want as much side clearance as you can, because you need that room to drop for your rotor and your wheel and your tire. So this will just protect my bike. I'm going to jack it up, cinch this up, let it back down on the stands. There'll be another one over on this side, and then we can start to get to it. Before that though, I need to loosen that axle nut. Before we take that axle nut off, we need to take out, or rather loosen, the 4 cinch bolts. Now on the rear you just have the 1. On the front, we have 4. These should only be in with 15 foot-pounds book spec. Who knows how much they're going to be in from the factory. That's actually moving pretty darn easily. So we're just going to get them loose enough to spin easily by hand. There's 1. And there's 2. Come around to the other side here. Okay. So those again are basically there as emergency, just in case this ever came off going down the road. Let's go ahead and get that off. Okay, now on the left, we have to use what is really the only difficult tool to find. This is a 19 mil hex socket. I found these at Harbor Freight. You can pretty much only find these in a set. This was labeled as an impact driver metric hex socket set. I got it on sale for 30 bucks. It came with 8 different sockets, the 19 luckily being the biggest one. I even tried Sears. They did not even sell a 19 alone. So your other option is ordering it online. I tried all the auto stores. They pretty much maxed out around 14. So this is, like on the back, used not only to pull the axle out, but to start tightening it, which we'll see shortly. This over here is a 22 millimeter regular socket, and oh my, that is not even funny. I have never touched this before in my life, and it was not tight. That is freaking scary. That was not tight from the dealer. I'm not kidding. This is live on camera. This is not a second take. Holy shit. I mean, not even finger tight. I touched it with the socket and it moved. I had not put, you saw, I did not even put pressure on that. Oh my God. Okay, well, there's a double illustration of why you should be doing this on a brand new bike. Not only to verify they put lubrication in, but to verify they tightened the axles. Holy shit. Pardon my language, but that is insanely dangerous. There's very little on the bike that I can even think of that would be more dangerous. Wow. Okay, let me recompose myself here. I need to jack the bike up, and we'll get it on jack stands. I need to take off. Yes, yeah, I'm a little flustered right now. Sorry. I need to take off this left side and the caliper bracket. Yeah, that's the word, from both sides, and the ABS on this side. Sorry, give me a second. Okay, back over here on the right hand side, just like the rear, we're gonna wiggle the calipers a little bit. Be very careful. There is hardly any clearance here between getting it off the rotor and nicking the edge of your wheel. So just carefully slide it back, wiggle it a little bit to spread the brake pads, give yourself some more clearance. And there we go. Literally, there's probably 1 millimeter of clearance. I'm not kidding. So again, we're just going to carefully let that sit there. Doesn't do any damage, no harm. These brake lines are probably heavier than the damn calipers. Don't worry about hanging them. Okay, so here on the left side, the only difference between the left and the right is the left has the ABS assembly. Works pretty much the same way. And yes, I had just loosened these so they're ready to spin out. ABS assembly is pretty much the same as the rear. And you know what, the more I think about that axle bolt, I think the front wheel on these is dealer assembled on delivery, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, I could see the dealer screwing it up a lot easier than the factory. I can't believe that still. Okay, so now we've got our bolts, and these are little hook brackets here for the ABS wire. I guess that'll stay on its own. And so will the reflector, so that'll stay there. Now we're going to do the same thing as the other side. I'm going to spread the brake pads a little bit by wiggling the caliper assembly just to give myself a little more clearance. Like I said, she's a tight. Now we're going to get this past the bracket and off the rotor. And by the way, when you're doing either one of these, whenever you have the brakes off the vehicle, never ever touch the brake levers. Otherwise you're gonna squeeze these pistons and then have to spread them apart to get them back on. I'm at a real awkward position here for the camera. Bear with me. There we go. Just lifting it up a little bit is all it needed. All right, so I'm going to carefully let that sit there. Whew. All right, now we can go up in the air. Now we've got it up in the air. We're going to use our 19 mil hex. We're going to twist, again, put a little pressure on it to try to grab the axle. We're going to slide it back out. And you can put your foot underneath the wheel, lift up on a bit, just to relieve pressure on the axle. And this one's coming out just fine. A little awkward here again, just from the camera angle. Normally I would be sitting right in front of this. You know what, let me reposition because I don't have a good position to grab that. Obviously, from how difficult this one's being, I'm gonna bet there's no grease on it either, just like the back one was. Alright, this one does not want to budge past that 1/2 inch, so what I'm going to do is take a socket extension. I'm going to put the big part up against the shaft. Whatever you use, make sure it's big enough so it does not go anywhere near the threads in there. And then I'm going to use my rubber hammer and very gently just pop it out, and that's all it took. There's no way this was sliding out. It is dry. It's taking some force here. Alright, so it's out of that left-hand hold. Now we should be able to, hopefully, pull it the rest of the way out and inspect it. Okay. I'm going to carefully let the wheel down here. Let's take a look. It is dry and there is some corrosion. So, not good. Not good at all. And this is, like I said, basically a brand new bike. So this is, again, something you absolutely need to do on a brand new bike. There's zero lubrication, zero protection, and I've got rust bands here. And that's just from normal use. You know, you guys have seen everything I'm doing with the bike. So it's nothing unusual. Not good. Luckily, hasn't damaged anything. We'll clean it up. We'll reassemble it with the proper film of grease. Now let's go ahead and take the rest of this off. I'm going to set this aside on my towel with my other axle. Now we have a spacer. If you're sitting on the bike, it's on the right hand side. If you're facing it like this, guess this glove is done. It's on the left. So be aware of that when you're taking this off. I'm just going to carefully roll this forward. I'm going to separate the ABS here and let it fall. And catch this spacer. Basically a small version of the collar on the back. And there's some sporadic grease on this, but not what there should be. It's almost completely dry on the inside. Yeah, this is what I was afraid of. Not quite high enough here to clear this fender just because I have the jack stands and they're pyramid shaped. So I'm going to go ahead and jack it up just a little bit more on the center. All right. And there we go. Didn't want to jack it up too far because you don't want it tipping backwards. Not quite to that point yet, but I'll jack it up once more to put this back in. All right, so same warning with the ABS here. Let me show you. Same warning with the ABS hub and the ABS unit itself, the sensor array. Do not get any magnets anywhere near either one of these. Bad things will happen to your ABS system. So at this point, we are completely off. We are ready to take our two wheels in to put new tires on, or if you need to change your brake rotors, you can go ahead and do that. If you need to repack your bearings or change your bearings, you can go ahead and do that. You know, whatever you needed to take these off for, that is all there is to it. Goodbye, Spider. Reassembly is pretty much the same thing in reverse. However, we are going to be lubing and greasing things, and there are very important torque specs. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, let's get her back together. I've got the wheel back in place. Now I'm going to slowly drop it back onto the jack stands. That way it's only an inch above the ground. I'm not having to lift this up while I slide the axle through or anything like that. Now we're going to clean this collar for the front axle and the front axle itself. And then we're going to apply some of the lithium-based grease to the inside and outside of the collar, and a light coating on the entire axle. I'm checking this corrosion to make sure there's no pitting, and it looks like pure surface corrosion at this point. Luckily, I caught it very early. I can't feel it, I can just see it. Not good. Not good at all. All right. There's no real clean way to do this. You just got to get your hands in there. Just a real light coating everywhere. We don't want globs of it sitting. Basically, we want an airtight seal on it so that none of that corrosion ever happens, and so that any metal-to-metal surfaces, like where it goes through that carrier seal, have something nice to ride on. And then just a little dab on the inside and outside of this. And these will be good to go after I change my gloves again. When you put the ABS hub back on, or sensor assembly I should say, notice this slot right here. All around it's just evenly spaced slots, but then you have this bigger one right here. This goes parallel with the fork, and on the underside of the fork is a little triangle nub just to point to it. Alright, so when that goes on, make sure that is lined up exactly with the fork right in the middle on the back side. Over on this side, I slip in our freshly greased collar. And there went the ABS assembly because I moved it. Just wiggle that into place. Alright, there we go. So that sticks out a little bit, works as a spacer. It's offsetting the thickness of the ABS on the other side. Now I'm gonna put the ABS back in place. And it's just roughly in position right now. I'll rotate it once we now have the axle going in. We can go ahead and grab that now. Gonna lift it with my foot while this goes through. And this does take some finagling and wiggling get it to seat all the way through into the other side. Just takes a little patience and work. There we go. Okay, so that's in. Now I'm going to put in the axle nut, just finger tight, so everything stays in place, and so we can get it off the jack stands. We want it up on stands as little as possible. Alright, now I can bring it back down on the ground. Torque spec for this Generation 3 is 66 foot-pounds for the front axle bolt. Again, consult your own service manual. Your value may be different. This will take a little time to cinch in as it draws in the other edge. There we go. Wow, so that's how you do it. Yamaha or dealer, one of the two that suck. Okay, next is torquing down the cinch bolts. Again, torque spec on this Gen 3 is 15 foot-pounds for each of them. And they want you to do it if you're sitting on the bike, right to left and then back to right. So we're going to do this one here. And the reason you do that is when you have two like this and it's spreading the load, when you torque the other one down, the other one, the first one, may have a little bit more to go still. Now again, if you do not have a lot of experience and you don't know what certain torque values feel like, use a torque wrench. I have done countless thousands of bolts. Anything up to about 20 foot-pounds I have a real good feel for. I don't do anything above that. The higher the torque value, the harder it is to get a read on it yourself. So you hear that? I tightened the first one, I tightened the second one. Now the first one loosened up a little bit after I tightened that one. Likewise on the other side, we're going from right to left. So that one's tight. Now we'll get this one. Apologize for the dog barking. Not mine. And now we'll check the other one again. It should snug up more. A little bit. Not as much as the other side did. Okay, now let's go ahead and button up the brakes. Okay. Putting the brakes back on. There's nothing really special about this. Just make sure your ABS line is out of the way. Line your bracket holes back up. And bolt them back down. Okay, buttoning up the front here. On this Gen 3, the torque specs for the brake caliper bolts is 29 foot-pounds. Again, consult your own manual to make sure you have the proper specs for your bike. Okay, the front's done. Now we can button up the back. Now, like I said, I'm very happy with the way these splines are greased, both on the wheel and the drive shaft side here. I have no problem with that. That's a nice, good, normal moly film. So I don't need to reapply or add any to that. If you see dry areas or not an even film, like we saw on the drive shaft, then go ahead and clean that off and apply a nice even coat of moly grease to that and the wheel side. So I'm going to go ahead and put my wheel back up in here and put it back on. Got to rearrange stuff here because I got the light and the camera right where I need to roll the wheel. Hold on, stand by. Before we put the rear tire back in, make sure that you put this collar back in and that it's nice and clean. There's no debris, especially on the inside of it where the axle goes through. And that simply pops right in to the middle of the drive shaft spindle. Now to put our rear tire in, again, no need for anything under the center stand or anything special like that. All you have to do, you can see it's already in, all you have to do is get it up to this point, then pick it up and rotate the bottom, and it goes right up underneath this license plate bracket. Really simple. I have no idea why people say you need to raise the bike up or put stuff under the center stand. So now what we have to do is just get this onto the drive shaft splines. It's kind of like on a car, aligning the wheel with the lug nuts, except you can see the lug nuts on a car. On this, we have to raise it up about 1.5 inches, and you just do that with your foot. So get it aligned front to back, then raise it up with your foot and push left, and you might just have to rotate it a bit to get it to line up with those splines. And it's just going to take a little bit of finagling until it pops on. Just like that. See, not that big of a deal. So now we can go ahead and get our brake caliper bracket back on and our ABS sensor back on. And again, that has a slot and a tab right about the 5 o'clock position, just like the front had those alignment tabs. And then you just line them up. Then we can run the axle through. And don't forget the flat washer that goes just on the inside of the swing arm here on the right side. Okay, now what we have to do is run our axle through, and this is going to allow the brake caliper to stay on and make sure everything is ready to be cinched up. And you can see I put a nice even layer of lithium based grease on everything except the end threads. Alright, so that's going to give a nice slip to everything. We need to position our ABS hub, and again you have an alignment mark here that goes to about 11 o'clock and a bigger slot at about 5 o'clock, and that's what the brake rotor bracket, brake caliper bracket will go into. You really can't mistake it. Only goes in one way, unless you try to force it, I guess. Alright, so that's going to sit there. Now I need to set this down. And if you have grease on your hands, be very careful what you touch. Do not touch your tire, do not touch your rotors. Just be careful. I'm just using the edge of my hand here, and my relatively clean one is going to be handling the brake rotor bracket as it comes up. I'm just going to keep this ABS hub in place. Just need to get the rotor in between the brake pads, swing it up into position. Come on now. Again, kind of hard to see for me because you're where I would normally be sitting, so you guys can see. There we go. Just have to make sure that your brake pads are spread. If they've come together a little bit, that rotor won't be able to slip in. And do not forget your spacer. That goes right on the inside of the swing arm, in between the swing arm and the caliper bracket. Wiggle it through, and you might have to take a little pressure off the wheel to get it to go all the way through. There we go. Little catch on the end there, and we'll draw the rest in with the bolt on the other side. And don't forget to torque down your rear axle cinch bolt. Book spec on this for the Gen 3 is just 17 foot-pounds. There we go. Okay, just finished it off. All you need to do is tighten down your bottom and top support beam bolts. The torque spec on this Gen 3, like I said, check your torque specs to make sure they're what they're supposed to be. The 22 foot-pounds on here are just really, really good and tight if you're going by hand. Then the last thing, at least on this bike, is snapping in the little plastic retainer for the brake line, and that goes into the last hole drilled in that beam. That's it. That buttons it up. So overall, not that difficult. Definitely worth doing. Man, you guys saw what I found on this. This is practically a brand new bike. Hardly any grease on that drive shaft, and a freaking front axle nut that was not even, I wouldn't even call it loose. It was just sitting there ready to spin. So I'm very glad I did this. Definitely do this even if it's a brand new bike, but now you know how to do it if you want to save some money and take your tires off, take your wheels off, and bring them alone up to the shop to get swapped out for you, or if you need to do the maintenance, if you want to do your own periodic stuff. That's it. Thanks for watching, guys. Give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. Check out the site, TwoWheelObsession.com, and we'll see you next time.